The pot roast turned to sawdust in my mouth, not because it was overcooked. Mom's pot roast was always perfect, but because my jaw had locked mid-chew as Dad slid the cashier's check across the dining table toward my sister. $100,000. The numbers swam in front of my eyes as conversations continued around me like I'd disappeared. "For the down payment on your house, sweetheart," Dad said, his voice warm in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in years. My brother-in-law clinked his wine glass against my sister's, the sound sharp enough to split atoms. Mom reached over to squeeze my sister's hand, her smile radiant. I tried to swallow, couldn't. My throat had closed around the food, around the moment, around 28 years of being the one they looked past. The chandelier above us, the one I'd helped Dad install when I was 16, holding the ladder steady for 3 hours, suddenly felt too bright, like stage lights exposing something ugly. "Rachel's always been so responsible," Mom added, dabbing her lips with the linen napkin I'd ironed that morning before driving 3 hours to be here. "We knew she'd invest it wisely." My fork slipped from my fingers. Not dropped, but released, my hand simply forgetting how to hold things. It clattered against the china, a sound no one acknowledged. Rachel's engagement ring caught the light as she reached for the check. I watched my parents' faces, waiting for someone to turn toward me, to remember I existed, to offer even the ghost of an explanation. No one did. "My name is Jordan, I'm 31, and I'm a freelance graphic designer. This is the story of how I turned invisibility into invincibility. Before I tell you what I built from that silence, tell me, where are you listening from? Drop your city in the comments so I know I'm not alone in this. And when you've heard everything, tell me, what would you have done in my place?" Growing up, our family Christmas cards were framed in neighbors' homes. "The Hendersons," they'd say, shaking their heads with admiration. Picture perfect. What they didn't photograph was who wrapped those presents, who cleaned up after those dinners, who learned early that love was something you earned by being useful and staying quiet. Rachel got straight A's. I got A- and told they showed lack of focus. She made homecoming court. I made art club president and got, "That's a nice hobby." When she turned 16, Dad surprised her with a Honda CR-V with a giant bow. When I turned 16, we went to Olive Garden and they gave me a $50 Visa gift card. "Be grateful," Mom said, straightening my collar for the family photo. The flash went off before I was ready. That picture still sits on their mantle, proof I existed, but not proof they saw me. College was where the pattern crystallized into something I couldn't ignore anymore. Rachel's tuition to UCLA, fully funded, room and board included. When I asked about help for state school, Dad set down his coffee with the careful precision of a judge delivering a sentence. "We're investing in Rachel's education because it's an investment that will pay returns," he said. Mom touched my hand, her voice soft. "State schools are perfectly fine for students who didn't push themselves harder." I signed loan papers alone, 6.8% interest on every dollar, $70,000 by the time I graduated. 2 jobs kept me afloat: campus library at dawn, diner at night. Winter split my hands open from the cold walks between shifts. When pneumonia hit sophomore year, I called home, shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. Dad said, "Maybe you're taking on too much. Have you tried better time management?" Mom asked if I was taking vitamins. I hung up and stared at the wall until the room went dark. What saved me wasn't them. It was Linda Morrison, the woman who lived next door to my apartment building. She appeared at my door with soup and a small envelope. "You're not alone, sweetheart," she said, pressing it into my palm. Inside was a $500 check and a note. "Pay it forward someday." I cried until the soup went cold, not because of the money, though it paid for medication and a week of groceries, but because someone had shown up. Someone had seen me struggling and decided I mattered enough to help. That moment taught me something I'd spend the next decade proving. I didn't need their approval to survive. I needed to learn who would actually show up. Graduation came on a blazing June afternoon. I scanned the crowd during the ceremony, searching for familiar faces among the sea of families holding bouquets and cameras. They hadn't come. Later, I'd learned they were at Rachel's medical school acceptance celebration dinner, the one they'd planned for the same day. "We assumed you'd understand," Mom said when I finally asked about it. Rachel's achievement was time-sensitive. I held my diploma on the bus ride home, the leather folder warm against my chest. My phone buzzed, Rachel's engagement announcement, her ring glittering under string lights. The caption read, "When you know, you know." I liked the post before turning off all notifications. That was the night I started planning my exit. Not dramatically. I didn't pack up and disappear. I just stopped waiting for them to see me. I started building a life where their blindness didn't determine my worth. Therapy helped me name what I'd been feeling for 28 years. Dr. Patricia Ward sat across from me in her office, afternoon light soft through the blinds, and asked one question that changed everything. Have you ever tried not performing for their approval? The question followed me everywhere. I practiced saying no in the mirror, the word foreign and dangerous in my mouth. When Christmas came, I sent no gifts, made no calls. The first day felt like betrayal. The second felt lighter. By the third, I could breathe without permission. Rachel's wedding happened without me. I'd been invited, sort of. The invitation came through an event planner's automated email, my name spelled Jordan. I closed my laptop and went to therapy instead. Dr. Ward listened as I described the invitation, then asked, "What do you need right now?" I needed to stop performing. I needed to be done auditioning for a role I'd never get cast in. So I didn't go. The wedding photos flooded social media anyway. Rachel's lace gown, my parents beaming, the caption, "Family is forever." I looked at those photos from my apartment balcony while city noise swelled below, and I realized something. They'd built a family story that required me to play a supporting role. I was writing myself out of their narrative entirely. Mom left a voicemail. "You're being dramatic. You know Rachel wanted you there." I deleted it without listening twice. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of possibility, full of my own voice, full of space to figure out who I was without their constant measuring tape pressed against my worth. I worked. I saved. I stopped scrolling their social media. I blocked their numbers, then unblocked them when the anxiety of wondering what they'd say became worse than actually seeing their messages, then blocked them again when I realized I was strong enough not to need answers. A year passed, then another. The ache didn't disappear. It just stopped directing my decisions. When pneumonia came back during that second year, I lay in urgent care under fluorescent lights, scrolling past Mom's contact info on my phone. My thumb hovered over her name. Then I turned off the screen. I'd learned that lesson already. When I got home, there was a note on my door. "Soup inside. Rest. Linda." She'd found me again, this time with chicken noodle and crackers. Her kindness hit harder than any apology I'd ever begged for. By the spring of that third year since graduation, I was restless. Therapy had helped me name what I felt. I was tired of surviving. I wanted to build something that couldn't be taken away, something that existed outside their approval or disapproval. I started looking at land listings, cheap acreage upstate, far enough that I could hear myself think. The kind of property people drove past without seeing potential. After 2 more years of careful saving and freelance contracts that finally gave me financial stability, I had enough for a down payment on land most people wouldn't look at twice. The seller's desperation and my willingness to buy as is made the impossible suddenly affordable. 5 years after that pot roast dinner, I signed papers for 40 acres of neglected soil and a house that needed more work than I knew how to give it. Everyone else saw a wreck. I saw sovereignty. The first nights were brutal. No heat, no internet, just wind rattling the siding and me swearing at frozen pipes. But every problem I fixed was mine. I learned to seal drafts with plastic sheeting, repair drywall from YouTube tutorials, keep lavender alive through late frosts. My neighbor, Marcus, stopped by one morning with coffee and a slow smile. "You working the land or letting it work you?" he asked. I laughed for the first time in months. We shared a brief romance that summer, gentle and uncomplicated. But as fall came, we both recognized I needed to focus on building my foundation before building anything else. He understood, and his friendship remained steady even as the romance faded. Weekends became rituals. Mud under my fingernails, sawdust in my hair, sunburn on my neck. Slowly, impossibly, lavender sprouted in the back field, shy green pushing through stubborn dirt. I started keeping journals, logging every mistake, every bloom. The pages filled like proof of transformation. One night, I stood in the doorway of that half-finished farmhouse, looking out over the field under a full moon. My breath fogged in the cold, but something inside me had settled. For years, I'd begged for belonging. Now I was building it with my own hands. By the time the next spring returned, my second spring on the property, I hadn't just gone silent. I'd gone sovereign. The lavender bloomed in waves that second spring, purple rose stretching toward the tree line. The bees had returned, thousands of them, steady and loyal, and I worked beside them in the early mornings when the dew still clung to everything. I didn't know it then, but that peace was about to be tested. It started with a text from an unknown number. "Jordan, is this really your place?" I didn't respond. Apparently, a mutual acquaintance from my college days had posted about visiting an incredible lavender farm upstate and tagged the general area on social media. Rachel, ever vigilant about my whereabouts even after years of silence, had spent weeks driving country roads until she found it. 2 hours later, Dad's number appeared on my screen. I'd kept it unblocked by then, more out of indifference than intention. I let it ring through to voicemail, then listened. "Your sister drove past a property in Soma today. Big field, tin roof, lavender everywhere. She says it looks professional. Is that yours?" I wiped the dirt off my hands, staring at the horizon. When I finally called back, his voice was too smooth, too casual. "It's impressive," he said. "We didn't know you were doing so well. Maybe we could help you expand. I have contacts, investors who'd be interested in this kind of operation." "No, Dad. You had your chance." He laughed, that low, patronizing sound I remembered from every failed report card. "Don't be stubborn. We're family." That word family landed like a stone in my chest. "Family doesn't fund your favorite and call the other one a failure," I said quietly. Then I hung up. 2 days later, an email arrived at the address listed on my business website. Subject line, investment proposal. I archived it without opening. A week later, another envelope came, this time by courier truck. The driver handed me a manila envelope and asked for my signature. My farm's address, now apparently part of their records thanks to Rachel's detective work. Inside was a personal check for $100,000. The memo line read, "For your college loans. We should have helped." Folded with it was a note in Mom's looping handwriting. "We were too hard on you. This is our way of making things right." I sat with it for 10 minutes. No tears, no shaking hands, just quiet. Then I got up, found my scissors, and cut the check into clean strips, thin as confetti. I slid the pieces into another envelope with one sentence written in blue ink. "You can't buy forgiveness." I mailed it back certified to their address, the same one I'd grown up in, the one I still knew by heart even though I'd never returned there. 3 days later, Dad showed up at my gate. The security camera caught him before I did. Khakis pressed, shoes polished, weekend face rehearsed. He waved at the lens like I was still that child waiting for his approval. I pressed the intercom button. "Leave." "I just need 5 minutes." His voice cracked in places it never used to. "I was wrong, Jordan. Please. I want to talk." "You had 28 years to talk. You used them poorly." He tried the parental tone again, the one that used to make me fold. "We're your parents. We made mistakes, but parents deserve access." "Access is earned," I cut him off, "not presumed, and definitely not purchased." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything he'd ever said to me. Then, softer. "Can't we move past this?" "You can move," I said, "without me." He looked straight at the camera, his eyes red at the edges, begging for something he didn't know how to name. "Forgive us." "I can," I said, my voice steady. "But forgiveness isn't reconciliation." The gate motor hummed to life. It closed slowly, mechanical and final. He didn't move until the panels met in the middle, cutting the view in half. The camera blinked once, then went still. I logged the visit in a notebook. Time, date, weather. Evidence beats memory when storms return. Then I went back to the fields. Work held better than nostalgia ever could. That night, I watched the footage again. The way he stood there, unsure what to do without power. The way I didn't flinch. I realized something no therapy session could have taught me. Peace isn't earned through apologies. It's protected by boundaries. A week later, another envelope came. No note this time, just the same check amount. Voided. A gesture of surrender, maybe, or guilt. I shredded it without opening it fully. The season moved forward. The lavender deepened its color. Bees thickened in number. The land stopped feeling borrowed. One morning, while checking the hives, I saw Rachel's car idling at the end of the road. She didn't drive in, just sat there. From where I stood, her face looked small behind the glass. She held up her phone like she was taking a photo, maybe proof for our parents that I existed outside their story. I didn't wave. I didn't move. I let her look as long as she wanted. Within hours, Dad called again. "Your sister says the property is worth over $2 million. Is that true?" "That's what the appraisal says." Silence. I could hear him breathe, recalculating. Then came the familiar pivot, the pitch disguised as concern. "You've built something incredible. But you can't manage all this alone. Let us help you grow it. You need experience, real guidance." I thought of every lecture, every withheld check, every smirk that followed my effort. I thought of the girl who once begged for a seat at their table. Then I said it, clean, quiet, absolute. "No." "Jordan." "No" is a sentence, I said, remembering Dr. Ward's voice. For the first time, there was no guilt in the word, only gravity. When I hung up, the fields hummed with bees. The wind carried lavender scent through the open windows. Somewhere beyond the gate, a car engine started, then faded away. That night, I walked the perimeter of the land, flashlight in hand, following the fence line I'd built myself. Each post stood firm, each wire tight. Boundaries, physical and otherwise, holding. They'd called me a failure. But failure had built something that outlasted their approval. 6 years of distance had turned into soil, roots, bloom, 2 years of careful saving, another year of property renovation, 3 more years of building the business from nothing to thriving. As moonlight brushed over the fields, I realized they'd been right about one thing all along. I wasn't part of their world anymore. I'd built my own. Summer came hot and full, the kind of heat that hums through everything. The lavender reached waist-high, thick and fragrant. Harvest week arrived and the fields turned into motion. Sophie and Nathan, the 2 local workers I'd hired for harvest season, moved through the rows with practiced efficiency, their laughter spilling through the fields. Their joy filled the spaces where guilt used to live. We packed boxes late into evening, barn doors open, cicadas loud in the trees. The first major order shipped at dawn. 6 figures, clean and steady. That single order paid off the remaining balance of my student loans, money my parents had refused to help with, now erased by my own work. I watched the truck disappear down the dirt road and felt something unclench inside me. For the first time in my life, everything supporting me was something I'd built. I sent care packages to everyone who had shown up when no one else did. Linda Morrison, Dr. Ward, Marcus. Though our romance had faded naturally as I focused on the farm, his early encouragement had mattered. Each box carried a note. "Thank you for staying when you didn't have to." One morning, I found an old photo wedged inside a book, a family picture, all of us smiling in perfect formation. I looked at my younger self, frozen on the edge of the frame, and whispered, "You made it out." The farm hummed outside, alive and honest. The gate stayed closed, but my world had never been more open. They had given her a house. I had built an entire life. And peace, real peace, was the only inheritance I ever needed. They called it rebellion. I called it recovery. If you've ever had to choose peace over permission, you'll understand what came next. There are more stories like mine about family betrayal and the quiet kind of revenge that comes from building something they can never touch. Stay with me. Watch the next story in the playlist. You're not alone. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, 0 cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.